It's been my pleasure and privilege to have known Dan Rutherford since a trip to Havana with George Ryan and the Illinois Press Corps, and we enjoyed a couple of Cuban cigars legally together, and that was the start of a beautiful relationship. But I think the story of Dan Rutherford really goes to where he comes from and the importance of the values of Central Illinois and McLean County and the part of the region that we know so well for its commitment to agriculture, but also the part of the state that was, say, the home to Everett Dirksen, the home to Abraham Lincoln, the home to so many folks, Ray LaHood, who have made a national name for themselves and for our state. Our speaker today spent time in the Illinois State House of Representatives. He then moved on to the state Senate. Only a couple of years ago, he became treasurer of this very big, very significant, and I think many of us in this room would agree, somewhat flawed but beautiful state. And he's going to talk to us about that today, and he's brought his props. He's not just a suit. He runs every morning, either outside or on a treadmill. He watches a movie. If you're a Facebook friend like me, he'll ask you, what movie should I watch? Somehow the Facebook friends last night voted for Jeremiah Johnson. So he spent the morning watching Robert Redford as a mountain man, but he is our state treasurer, and he's your elected representative for all of the money in the state of Illinois. Ladies and gentlemen, a City Club welcome for Dan Rutherford.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't want to correct you, Chris, but I did not spend all morning jogging. Just so everybody knows, I got up really early and did my jog. Another correction, and I hate to do this to you, young man, I don't run anymore. I used to when I was a young man. I have now gotten to the point that it is a jog, and as I'm getting older, I see that it's becoming a fast waddle. But I'm trying to keep it going there. Jay, thank you very much for your leadership. And Father, thank you, especially for the prayer, not just for myself, but for those of us that do take on the task of serving the public. It is not easy, and I want you to know how much I appreciate it. And Chris, thank you. Paul Green, you're unique. We'll leave it at that. So. What I thought we'd do, and I've had the honor to speak before you before, so I know the questions is really the best part of the afternoon. So I want to just kind of go through a couple things with you, and then we'll go right into that. And that as I walked around, and some of you said, well, you're going to tell us about the finances today. And I said, enjoy your cannolis first, because it's only going to get really bad after that. But just as a background for me, I am actually from the private sector. I am from a company called ServiceMaster Corporation, and my friends I see from DuPage County out here had been out there for many years. I was 25 years. In fact, I retired the December before I took the January oath of office in January 2011. 25 years, and during that time, we acquired companies like Terminex Pest Control, True Green, Chemlon, Merry Maids, and on and on. And I was responsible to take our businesses to new markets in Honduras, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Philippines, Chile. So I was responsible to help our company expand globally. And during that time, I negotiate contracts. Now, obviously, I understand receivables, payables, regulations, bureaucracy, all of that, sales. But the one thing that I learned as a skill set as a young man maturing into that business was how to negotiate a contract. So let's just hit the nail right on the head. I took office January 10, 2011. One day later, the administration and the General Assembly voted for the largest income tax increase in the history of the state of Illinois. And all they did was bring in money. They did not put together a package. As a legislator, not one time did I ever sign one of these statements to say that I promise not to vote for an income tax increase. It's Bombay. I just want a water, Paul. It's unique. It's unique. Now you know my point, ladies and gentlemen. And at not one time did they negotiate a contract. What they did was basically say, bring in money, and then we move on. What I learned is, you don't agree to one thing in a contract and hope the rest of it comes along. If you have to hold out, you hold out and put together the complete package. And I think that's where the problem came on. We are now 2 years into this income tax increase, and the problem still lies out there, even with all this new money that's coming out of the pocketbooks of companies, purses, and wallets of the public. Let me give you a couple of factoids here now as we move down this whole thing. The outstanding bills to vendors in January 2011, vendors meaning the company that delivers bread to the prison for the prisoners, the community-based mental health services, our schools, those that deliver services for developmental disabilities, our hospitals, okay? See the heads bobbing in here. You know what I'm talking about. $8.5 billion. We are now 2 years down the road with the income tax increase. You know what our standing bills were in January 2013? $9 billion. It's getting worse, and this is with the income tax increase. My point was that was a bad contract. As we continue to look at what's going on out there, I've got this on your desk. I'm sorry, on your desk, on your table. Listen up, students. I've got this on your table out there. Before I go there, I'm for Pat Quinn. Totally for Pat Quinn. His budget address, where I sat there in the front row about where the father is right now, and his entire focus, main focus, was General Assembly, let's get going, let's fix the state public pension system. Now, many of you in this room know me pretty well and know the political nature into which Governor Quinn and I are at. I respect him considerably. I agree with him on some, and where we don't, I believe we have a respectful dialogue on what we can do to make things better. This is one that the minute I got done being in the chambers of the General Assembly, and I walked out, and of course all the television cameras want to get the react to the state treasurer about Governor Quinn's address, I said up front, I'm for Pat Quinn. I'm on board to help him get fixed the state public pension issue. We've been 2 years down the road. I don't think that they handled it very well 2 years ago, but you know what? That day has come and gone, and now we are where we are today. 8 times since the income tax increase went into effect, the administration has said that we are going to resolve the state public pension system. 8 times. The last one was on that lame duck session of January 2013. Some of you may remember that. 8 times when it didn't happen, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch issued some negative issuance on our state. It was either a warning, like if you go here at the end of 2012, and this is one, or a watch, or a downgrade. The one that a lot of folks don't understand is the fact of how this permeates beyond just the general obligation bonds. And I know we've got some of our road construction, road builder, road team guys in here, and they're very sensitive, as they should be, with regards to the bonding for roads. But this also directly affects McCormick Place. You look at what happened in the early part of 12 on McCormick Place bonds. Anyone in here involved with tourism, Ted? There's a whole lot of you in here involved with tourism. That affects that. Anyone in here been involved with a public university? You go to the end of 2012. Our Moody's has placed the long-term ratings of our universities under a possible downgrade. This permeates deep. If you've got a student in a university that's living in a residence hall today, if those downgrades go through, they're going to pay more in interest, which means their dormitory fee will go more to interest than it will to principal. It touches every one of us. One more factoid. Illinois went into the bond market in January of 2012 to borrow $800 million for school construction. Here's the part that really gets me. I don't believe that these 8 downgrades, or negative issuances, not all downgrades, negative issuances, have driven a result to the General Assembly to say enough to act. In January 2012, the administration went in the marketplace to borrow $800 million for school construction. Now, I'm not for any further long-term debt for operations. The administration, Governor Quinn, had called to borrow money, about $9 billion for 15 years to pay for rubber bands and paper clips and payroll. I'm opposed to that. But the idea of long-term borrowing with a revenue stream to pay for brick, mortar, road construction, if the package is there, I could be for that. $800 million. The treasurer said, I came out and I said, we got to be careful. This is bad. This will cost the taxpayers of Illinois $70 million more in interest than if we were a AAA like Missouri. The administration issued the bonds. The response was, the treasurer was wrong. We got the best interest rates we've ever gotten. I stepped back and I said, no. And here's the problem with doublespeak that goes on in Springfield. And that's why I decided I'm taking this microphone and calling it just like it is. No. Yes, you're right. You got the best interest rates because they're the lowest interest rates that they are on the planet. Actually, you know what? The treasurer was wrong. It wasn't $70 million. It was $80 million. It cost the taxpayers of Illinois under that $800 million bond issuance in January of 2012, $80 million more in interest than if we were a AAA like Missouri. Every one of us that are going to the pump and putting gas in or buying a driver's license or license plate, that means more of it's going to the interest than it is to principal. All right. In March of that same year, Illinois went into the bond market for $575 million. And you know what? God bless. Brick and mortar, road, rail, can be for it. Hang on. $575 million because the market was worse than what it was in January. Absolutely, this isn't from the treasurer. This comes from Bloomberg. It cost the taxpayers of Illinois $100 million more dollars in interest. That's $100 million more in interest in a $575 million bond issuance than if we were a AAA. Look all the way down. You see Moody's, Fitch, and Standard taking us down and down and down and down until finally you got to the last one here, Standard, in January of 13 that moved us to A-, moved California, and us negative and California stable. Illinois was ready to go into the bond market for another $500 million. $500 million. The treasurer calculated that it'll cost the taxpayers of Illinois $90 million more if we were AAA. You know what happened? The morning of the bond issuance, the administration pulled it and didn't sell it. This is coming home now. This is absolutely coming home to roost. And when I talk to you gentlemen and ladies that are involved in construction here just today, how far in arrears the state is sending you your money, and how many projects are already out there, and how many times you go around and you hit the pothole. And you know how bad it is out there. We can't even issue our own debt because it is costing us so much more in interest. What's the issue? Totally the state public pensions. After that income tax increase, we're able to wing it. In fact, that year, dollar for dollar, the amount of the income tax increase you and I, my mother, and your grandmother paid in taxes was just enough dollar for dollar to pay for the increase in payment to the public pensions. The next fiscal year, draconian cuts. Ask our friends in K through 12. Ask our friends in public safety. Draconian cuts. Now we're getting ready for the next fiscal year. We are finally at the point that they're crossing. Natural revenue growth is now, even with the income tax increase, not enough to keep up with the increased payment necessary in the public pensions. Okay, treasurer will be off by $5 million. Give me a break. Depends on who you have calculating these, but these are numbers that aren't just mine. These come from the administration. The natural revenue growth for fiscal 2014, meaning no more rate increases just because of sales tax increases or gaming, video poker, those sustainable type of revenues, is going to be $600 million. Now, the projected payment for 2014 pension increase only $945 million. It doesn't take you long to figure out a $345 million spread is going to have to be responded to in one of a couple ways. Number one, you raise tax rates. Evil. Number two, you borrow the money. Eviler. Number three, you figure out how to cut $345 million out of the current operational budget. I know this governor, this administration, this General Assembly, they will find that to be the evilest. It's not going to be easy. As a business guy, what do? You go back and you look at the 945, lower it down. When Governor Quinn delivered his budget address, I absolutely said up front, I'm here to help you, Governor. There's a lot of reasons I want it taken care of now, so it isn't going to be down the road a little later on, too. But I think the idea of getting it done now is much better for the taxpayers today. How serious is this? I've given you some of the factoid numbers, but just this morning, if you haven't seen it, the Securities Exchange Commission just got done settling a suit with the state of Illinois. They came out right up front and basically said that Illinois had not been doing things legally from 2005 to 2009. Now, I will give Governor Quinn the benefit. He was not the governor. It's the guy that's already in prison. But basically, the Securities Exchange Commission said, through an agreement between the administration and the SEC, that Illinois was not properly putting into his bond disclosures how bad things really are in our public pensions. They had to go into an inquiry. They have now gone and put a cease and desist in place this morning. Now, again, I credit the administration. They are working to resolve it. But that's how serious this has been. We have not been playing fair, not just with the taxpayers of Illinois, we've not been playing fair with the SEC. It's finally starting to catch up to us. Fair question. All right, Mr. Treasurer, what would you do? To quote Paul Green, I'd put it all on the table. Somebody asked me on an interview, and that was what he was kind of having fun with me at lunch on. What do you think about raising the retirement age? I said, put it on the table. What do you think about the idea of the schools, downstate schools, to pay the portion of the contribution? Put it on the table. Here's what's happened. I've seen people in Springfield that agree to one thing, and I've told you the example I just gave you. Now, I understand political posturing, shenanigans, and maybe even with a good heart and intent to put something out there to get a roll call on somebody so you can do a mailer against them in a campaign, right? Okay, so what's going on down in Springfield on this pension issue is put this out there, and it's horrible, so everybody either votes against it or don't vote. I don't think necessarily that that's the way you put together what's best for the public of the state of Illinois. I'm a guy who never once said I wouldn't vote for an income tax increase, so put it on the table. What we need to do is understand that some tough love is going to happen in that capital city. I respect the fact that every time I go to a room, a Kiwanis Club or Rotary, there's going to be that nice retired teacher. And you know what's tough? When you go back to Pontiac, where I'm at, and you go into Pfaff's Bakery, and your teacher's sitting there having her coffee, and she looks at you. I'll tell you, it's tough. And I have the conversation with her, just like I'm having here with you. Anyone that's retired deserves their pension, period, not to be diminished. But I think there's a couple things fairly, and I told my retired teacher this. I think there's a couple things fair we ought to put on the table. Put it on the table. I'm not sure that a 3% automatic cost of living increase every year is sustainable. Tie it to something. Negotiate with me. Tie it to CPI. You got a better idea? Let me know. Let's negotiate it. A second thing, put it on the table. With all respect, if you happen to be the widow and your pension is your deceased husband's, and that's what you're living on, and you're at $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 a year pension, maybe the state should pay 100% of your retiree health care. But I'm not quite so sure that if you're $200,000 university professor retired, that you should have 100% of your health care paid for. So means tested. If you are at a certain level, means tested. And if you are at a higher level, you pay a higher percentage. If you're lower level, a lower percentage. As I talk about those things, they seem pretty logical. They seem like something that you should be able to negotiate as a complete package. But what's the problem then? And I say this with all due respect because we each have our role in life to play. But we find that our public employee unions are quite resistant. And that's probably a passive way of saying it, actually. So they're quite resistant. So what we need to do collectively as a body of public opinion leaders, as you all are here, donkeys and elephants, Chicago ones and Alexander County ones, we need to put ourselves together to negotiate a complete package and put it all on the table. Because what's going to be good for that teacher of today to have a system available tomorrow won't happen because the teacher pension system last year finally had to start selling assets to make payments. How long do you think that's going to be sustainable? That's the tough love that we need to have in Springfield right now. And so when Governor Quinn came out with his comments, I felt nothing better to do than as the treasurer to say, I'm for Pat Quinn getting this thing fixed. Now, I would be more than glad to go into unclaimed property, how successful we've been at that. I'd be glad to tell you about how we've cut our budget by 3%, 2% last year. I'd be glad to go into all of that stuff, but why don't I leave that for some of the questions you may have. But before I close out to go to that, this state is a great state. I'm born here, educated here, I've made my career here, I've been a public servant here. And at the time the Lord says, I'm going to probably be buried here. We can make Illinois another great state again. Look at the wonderful global city we've got in Chicago. Outstanding recreational, terrific educational facilities. We've got ourselves the infrastructure, high-speed rail. We've got our, not high-speed rail, high-speed internet. We've got ourselves road, rail, highways. Right in the center of the greatest market on this economic part of the planet. And right now, there's a lot, I know, I'm speaking every little place I can speak. There's a lot of, now I want to be careful the word I'm using, so help me if I didn't quite hit it right. But there's a lot of down. Depression maybe. Because you hear about our downgrade. And you hear us having the highest unemployment rate right now in the entire Midwest. We've got the highest minimum wage in the entire Midwest. We've got ourselves settling suits out of the SEC coming out as early as this morning. There's a lot of stuff going on out there that makes our small businesses resistant to say, you know, maybe I should add 1 or 2 more people, but when I add 1 or 2 more people, I don't know where we're going in Illinois. Or your big company like State Farm Insurance, which is looking to locate, they're not looking to move their headquarters out of Bloomington, but they're looking to open their regional call centers in a different state. Or you look at our good employer Caterpillar Tractor based in Peoria, and they're not moving. Doug's not going to move it out of there. But in over a decade, they haven't opened up one manufacturing facility in their home state. You got to step back and say, what's going on? And I'll tell you what I think it is. Besides that depression, I think that a lot of our business types are unsure where we're going in our tax structure. If our taxes are our taxes, and they know they're going to be that at the tax rate, they'll calculate that within their formula and make a decision. Okay? Yes or no? But the challenge we have right now today is when we have this 600 and 945 cross, and if we don't fix where we're going in the next 2 years, in 2015, when the income tax increase, majority of it is due to expire, how many of you believe that's really going to happen? That's the issue that our business folks out there that are going to put people to work have got to try to decide. What is the tax structure of Illinois going to be like in the future? That's the part that's the biggest challenge, I think, for us. And I don't even want to digress too far, but we've got ourselves some of the most horrible crime situations in the South and West Side. And I come down to the fact that if we get people to work and don't have an unemployment rate in the African American community of 45 to 55%, that might be a good start to help us cut down on some of that. Getting people to work, having a better tax structure so we know where we're going to go. This place is a great state, and we can turn it around. The problem with Illinois is not Illinois. The problem we got with Illinois right now is the government leadership that we've got down in the state capitol. And we can also turn that around at some point in time. Thank you for letting me be with you this afternoon.
I've got one question. I'm looking for more questions to come down here. Don Price, or Priest of HOH. The treasurer of Rhode Island was in Chicago last month talking about how she fixed her state's pension problem. Per capita, their problem was about the same as Illinois' is now. What did the treasurer of Rhode Island do that you have not done?
Fair enough. That's Gina Raimondo. In fact, Gina and I have gotten together more than once to talk through that. The treasurer of Rhode Island is dramatically a different role than the treasurer of the state of Illinois. And each treasurer in different states, some elect, some appoint. Gina's position actually puts her as the chairperson of the pension systems. I do not have that authority. I am the investment officer of the state. So actually the stuff I'm saying here, I don't have the direct standing in, but I've got the bully pulpit. So what Treasurer, and again, Raimondo and I have talked quite extensively. What Gina has done is work with the public employee unions, putting them in the room, with the administration, putting them in the room to negotiate out a final settlement. That's what we should do in Illinois. I have no doubt about it. If I had the authority, if I was king of the forest, I'd be doing that. I've let it be known to the administration that I'm willing to be helpful and help bring in some of my colleagues. I'll tell you, there's a number of folks here in the city of Chicago, some of our business and community leadership that have stepped up and have really taken on some tough challenges and presenting some alternative solutions, putting them in the room. That's what we need to do in Illinois, similar to what the treasurer did in the state of Rhode Island.
Okay, terrific. I've got a couple of questions about the pension, and I'll just group these. Then, Dan, you can pick up the themes as you wish. Jerry Latherow of the Illinois Trial Lawyers Association, what is your specific plan to address the pension issue? Nancy Furfer, what is your opinion of Representative Nekritz's pension bill? You had another question you covered on Gina Raimondo. And Ralph Martir of the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability proposes extending the ramp-up as a way to solve the pension crisis. Is this approach feasible, in your opinion, as a way to avoid massive budget cuts? And that's from Brian Philflay.
Okay. Let me, to my friend from the trial lawyers, that's when you say, what is my specific? You know, I'm not here to give you what that specific is, and I'm not dancing the issue. My point is, all of the other comments there, the ramp up, put it on the table. And all of those things that we've talked about before, and there was one other, the other earlier part of that.
He's hiding the question.
Okay. No, I don't remember. But here, oh, I'm sorry, the Nekritz. It was the Nekritz bill. You know, I've met with Representative Nekritz and Senator Biss and Representative Cross in my office, and they asked me to embrace it. I said, I can be for it. And again, well, they hadn't had all the details yet. So what I'm saying is the devil becomes down to the point of the details. Put it all on the table. Ramp, you know what? I think the ramp probably is something we should look to adjust. Should we look at changing the retirement age? Probably so. Should we look at ourselves on the COLA? I think so. What about the means testing healthcare? I kind of think so. But each one of these is like negotiating a license entry for Terminex in the Philippines. All right? You don't say yes to this one. And by the way, it's kind of like that lava lamp. This thing bubbles up and goes bloop. You don't do that until you get them all on the table. You all look at each other and you say, deal. And then you walk it out there. And that's where I think part of what we're seeing in Springfield right now is not productive. Where are you on this? Put me on a roll call. Where are you on that? Put me on a roll call. Well, you know, put it all on the table and negotiate it in its entirety, and then you got yourself a deal.
Okay. One of those questions came from our friend Tom McGrath of the Chicago International Charter School. All right. Sandy Blau asks, didn't you and Judy Bart Topinka once propose merging the Treasurer's Office and the Controller's Office? Is there any chance of that happening?
Yes, we did, and no, there's not.
Okay.
No, let me, here, yes, we did. Candidate Topinka and candidate Rutherford and Comptroller Topinka and Treasurer Rutherford concur, did and do, to consolidate the two offices. We worked with all of the parties that were interested in this in the House, the Senate, Democrats, Republicans. We all agreed on the language, so we didn't get somebody to say, well, I want to call it the Comptroller of the Treasury, and somebody else call it the Secretary of Treasury or whatever it is. We all agreed what it is. Kwame Raoul, Senator Chicago, friend of mine, introduced the joint resolution. I appeared on the Senate floor, passes unanimously. Goes to the House of Representatives, Judy Barr appears in committee, passes out. Speaker Madigan put a brick on it. Did not get called for a vote. So we did not get it out to be able to have the resolution to go to the public during the November of 2012 ballot, so we could have changed it for the future. We have reintroduced the resolution. I'm not here to give the public announcement, but all you media folks, Judy and I are going to do it again. And we'll get it out of the Senate, we know that, and unfortunately the Speaker will not let it go for a vote. If you want to ask me the follow-up question as to why, I would be delighted to answer that one.
Why?
Well, since you brought it up, here, I think there's, well, first of all, we're saved $12 million. Now, that's the good side. The public side, and I say this with total respect to the Speaker, Mike and I work together on a number of issues, but this is one we just happen to don't see eyeball to eyeball on. The public answer is, well, it's for the check and balances. I said, well, Mr. Speaker, Back when Orville Hodge stole the money in the 1950s and we changed the Constitution in the 1970s, we don't have, in my vault, I don't have bags of money or convertible instruments. All right, wouldn't have it anyway, this state. But we don't have it. It's all electronic. And by the way, we have an Auditor General, which didn't exist before 1970. So if Judy and I wanted to figure out how to go to Tahiti together with some cash, it's just not going to be there. So that I don't find as a real reason. That's the public reason. Now, I don't know, but let's think about this. In 40-plus years, there's only been 4 Republicans ever elected as a comptroller or a treasurer. Can't remember the first guy. You know, somebody in here, you probably know him, Jay. Lolita Diedrichson, Judy Bart Topinka, and Dan Rutherford. Okay? That's it. Lindbergh. George Lindbergh. I apologize to George Lindbergh. There's only been 4. Out of 40 years, 2 offices, they've all been Dawn Clark Netsch, God bless her, and, you know, Alexi Giannoulis and Dan Hines and on and on and on. My guess is maybe he's got another reason not to have those 2 offices consolidated.
Okay, well, there was a lot to ponder over your cannoli. And table 17, we're getting you more cannoli. We got that taken care of. Mark Weiermuller asks, a St. Ignatius class of 1978, I might point out, Dan, would you support IRAs and 401ks for new state employees and teachers to phase government out of a defined benefit pension business?
The short answer is put it on the table. No, but conceptually the answer is yes, and I will give you 2, and they are not contradictory reasons. One is I have literally been with public employees that say, I would rather have my own self-directed program. I don't want this defined benefit business. I would rather have that. So it is not that it's resisted, okay? But the other is I'm not sure that it is a total shift to 100% 401k employee contribution is in the best interest long term. I think that similar to what I understand was done in Rhode Island is a blend between part contribution, part benefit. And I think, in fact, you'll see that the head of our Illinois State Board of Investments has recently come out with a column on that says that it could work with a blend, but maybe not a whole 100% on one side. So put it as a part of the mix. I would definitely be favorable to that kind of a discussion.
2 more, and the first one has sort of 2 parts. From Jane Johnson, 4th Ward aldermanic candidate, claims to be Dan Rutherford's #1 fan. Before fingers start pointing at you regarding the financial condition of Illinois, to what years should the public look and scrutinize? Okay, are there years, I guess, prior to your being around that were particularly disruptive? The second part is, do you have an opinion on O'Hare expansion?
You join those together.
Well, let's go to here. I don't think, first of all, you can't blame me, and respectfully, you can't blame Pat Quinn. You can't blame Alexi Giannoulis, and you can't blame Rod Blagojevich, and you can't blame Jim Thompson. This is a collective, whole bunch of folks that did a whole bunch of things, and for lots of reasons, we're in the spot we're in. Now, that is going to be horribly mushy to try to get the public to understand that, especially when you get into a campaign, because it's going to be easy to say, well, she was somebody's treasure. Remember that one? So you can't, and I say this very candidly, you can't blame any one of them. The fact is we are in the situation we are in today, and we have to collectively respond to it, Democrats and Republicans. And I say that with the majority party and those that are in the minority party. Here, the easy thing is, because every school teacher, that little teacher at Pfaff's Bakery in Pontiac, she always says, well, you guys didn't put the money in. Okay, you know what? Shame on them, bad General Assemblies. And by the way, I checked my roll call. I never once voted for a budget that did not fully fund the state pensions, so we got that. But okay, bad old governors and General Assemblies, they didn't put in what they should have. Shame on them. But you know, the other thing that was a problem that exacerbated is that the governing boards of these pension systems had rates of return that were unrealistic. The retired teacher system until the end of last year had the rate of return at 8.5%. That wasn't realistic. They stepped up, they lowered it, to 8%. Okay? So when you've got that rate, that shift, 8.5 to 8, that costs the obligation of the taxpayers an additional $300 million more. That's the second problem. The third issue, notice how, Father, I didn't say it was a problem, but the third issue is we're living longer. That's a good one. So all of those things collectively has put us where we are today. You can't blame anyone, but we are the stewards today that have to fix it now. As far as O'Hare, the expansion, I guess it depends on which direction, up, down, sideways, west, east. As far as the west side expansion, I would definitely be looking at it. I know there's been some issues, some controversy and so forth, and I'm just glad you didn't ask me about Piatone.
And what do you really think about, oh, that's okay. Okay. Because of the remarkable lack of political substance in what you've delivered today, Kent Griffiths asks, if you announce for governor, and frankly, why, when are you going to announce for governor? That's my addition. Who is preparing you for the, and this is what Kent wrote, so I'm reading, Axelrod style slime machine op research that is sure to hit you as a loyal Republican office holder?
Ken, I want to thank you for that question. I have not announced for governor, but I don't think it's a secret to one person in this room that doesn't believe that we're not looking at that. We will be making an announcement in the later spring, early summer, and that's about all I'll say about that right now. As far as what kind of campaigns that they get into, and I understand the question, I've been through a lot of tough races. And I think that the style and mediums today are different than they used to be, but Abraham Lincoln went through a lot of tough races too. Whatever happens, if we make the move to decide to run, it shall be. And I reflect back on a manatee. You know what a manatee is? That nice creature trying to do good out there just eating a little grass. And then that motorboat just runs over the top of them. Scars up their back pretty tough, and then they got a tough leather hide and they keep on going. One thing that I do know is, though, that I'm the only Republican right now looking to run for governor that has actually won a statewide race. The other thing that I happen to know is when Governor Thompson and Jane hosted an event for me in their home, the governor said, Danny, if you're going to win this race statewide, 2010 for state treasurer, you've got to get 20% of the city of Chicago, not Cook and elsewhere, 20% of the city of Chicago. I got 22% of the city of Chicago. Our Republican candidate got 18. I won. I look at it, and I got a phone call a few days after I won the state treasurer's race. I got a phone call from our United States Senator Mark Kirk. Mark says, Dan, do you realize down ballot state treasurer, you got more votes in this state than I did for United States Senate? Actually, I did know it, but I didn't want to tell him I knew it. I wanted him to tell me. And not apples to apples. It's a whole different scene. I get it. I got 66,000 more votes down ballot as state treasurer than Pat Quinn got winning the governor's race. I think that Illinois is ready for someone to look them in the eye, talk the talk, who's walked the walk, tell them the truth, be believable, understand that there's a lot of things that we're not going to agree on, and keep it to the finances. Don't let abortion or gay rights or guns define a good person from a bad person. And I think the public of Illinois is willing to give someone a shot to try to turn this place around. And if somebody comes back in with the type of campaigns you talked about, you almost got to be like a manatee. Be ready for it and have that tough leather hide. I'm honored to be back here with you today. Thank you so much.